We also found that there are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang, occurred during the 7th of October attacks in at least 3 locations, namely the Nova Music Festival site and its surroundings, Road 232 and Kibbutz Reim.
I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right, thanks for joining. Stick around, more Rising coming up next.
Briahna Joy Gray was a co-host on the Hill YouTube channel, which calls itself a weekday morning show with bipartisan hosts that breaks the mold of morning TV by taking viewers inside the halls of Washington power like never before. The show leans into the day's political cycle with cutting-edge analysis from DC insiders who can predict what is going to happen. It also sets the day's political agenda by breaking exclusive news with a team of scoop-driven reporters demanding answers during interviews with the country's most important political newsmakers. Now, I can tell you, as someone who's watched quite a bit of their coverage, that there is indeed a political agenda that tends to creep in, especially from Briahna herself. In fact, here's what Briahna thinks about the sexual assault claims that Israel and others have made about Hamas. I want you to compare it to what the UN and others have stated and ask yourself if she has an agenda, because I sure as hell think she has an obvious one.
Mass story, screams without words, suffered another blow to its credibility yesterday, this time dealt by the New York Times' own reporting. Yesterday, the Times reported that video taken by an Israeli soldier directly contradicts evidence cited in the Times report, specifically in the original story from last December. An unnamed paramedic alleged that he found the bodies of 2 partially clothed teenage girls in Kibbutz Be'eri that showed signs of sexual violence. But the video footage now shows 3 female victims fully clothed with no signs of sexual violence. Residents of the kibbutz say no other teenage girls were killed, admitting the possibility of a simple mistaken identification. And a member of a group from Kibbutz Be'eri that looked into the sexual assault claims told the Times, and I quote, "The story is false." The New York Times now appears to be trying to whitewash its complicity in spreading mass propaganda by citing other outlets, including the AP, CNN, and the Washington Post, as examples of outlets who also repeated the false account of this unnamed paramedic. But shared guilt is not absolution.
First subjected to rape and then killed, and at least 2 incidents relate to the rape of women's corpses. With regard to the hostages taken to Gaza, we found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including sexualized torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, has been committed against captives. And we also have reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may still be ongoing against those still held in captivity. I pause and must add that I am of the strong opinion that this finding does not in any way legitimize further violence, but actually reinforces the need for an urgent ceasefire.
It's funny how often people who support progressive values lack consistency with how they express those values, but I want to draw your attention to Briahna's previous depiction of the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp case with respect to social agendas. She suggests that the trial itself isn't about Me Too, even though it directly is mentioned in the op-ed itself. But she goes as far as suggesting that it's a bad case for and against Me Too, but her co-host couldn't even fully agree, as we all know that it's a perfect example of how the weaponization of victimhood has become a semi-permanent fixture in our culture. So with this in mind, does it really surprise anyone that Briahna will pick and choose which version of reality she entertains as legitimate?
The fact of Amber Heard also being a bad actor here doesn't help Johnny Depp in his defamation claim if he also was a bad actor. So part of what's so frustrating in all of this is that the appetite for this and the focus on Amber Heard's bad acts, which, you know, it's legitimate, they're bad acts, is in some ways, I think, indicative of people of an appetite for undermining Me Too. Since this case isn't actually about that. The case is about what Johnny Depp did, like legally, right, not morally, but legally it's about what Johnny Depp did. The fact that there's such an appetite for Amber Heard's behavior and the viral hashtags of, Me Too Gone and all of this stuff, it suggests to people that the simmering resentments from that movement are still there, and people are capitalizing on this case as a way to push a broader political agenda, and that's unfortunate, because this is a bad case to make for Me Too, and it's a bad case for people who are trying to make some broader claims about the non-existence of Me Too as a phenomenon.
Well, I think I mostly agree with that. Yes, the defamation bar is a very high one to clear for good reason,
especially for public figures.
Yeah, I don't know that he's going to even come close to clearing it. You're right, he wasn't specifically named. She said she was a domestic, that she had gone through domestic abuse. That's not actually very specific language even. And it looks actually clear from airing the facts that there was some abusive behavior. Now, there was abusive behavior in both directions, but that doesn't matter for the defamation claim. So I absolutely agree with you on all that. The reason but she tried to cash in on she wanted the victimhood status. She wanted this is the culture, this is the Me Too moment, and I should be a figure of it because of what I went through. And that was not a wise choice on her part either. The ACLU really screwed up by getting themselves involved in this, in my opinion. That whole thing is very shady, and then the promising of the money from the divorce. There's something.
In the aftermath of this firing, Briahna has gone on other podcasts to express, you guessed it, her victimhood, as personal accountability isn't something that's part of the progressive mindset these days. Briahna insists that her interviewee had a bone to pick with her and that she couldn't properly defend her views as a co-host as it conflicted with her responsibility, though she mentions how the network openly encouraged contention between her and her co-host Robbie, which created a bit more opposition than there would naturally be. But as confusing and contradictory as this may seem, Briahna also insists that the network itself is also a part of some conspiracy to protect the Jewish people and the state of Israel from any negative attention.
Whose parents survived the Holocaust themselves. So this is the kind of pressure that we've been under. And as much as you see me arguing with Robbie on air, that is our job. In many ways, that has been more tense behind the scenes because of the editorial control that they have been trying to wrest over me personally. I think Robbie, frankly, he'll speak for himself at some point, I'm sure, but has been under a lot of pressure to push back against me in ways that maybe are even artificial to his own belief structure, because the show people at the company desire there to be balance, even if this is not necessarily an issue where there are both sides. And I think that's ultimately what led to the interview, which is being held up as the pretext for my firing. I am hesitant to give the Hill more clicks at this point, but I do encourage people to go and listen to the whole interview, because there's a couple of things. One is that this is not someone that the Hill reached out to. They weren't looking for a guest who was a family member of a hostage, or who could give the perspective of what those family members are going to. This person offered themselves up, and very specifically when making the request, said that they wanted to talk to me. And when our producer, Joanne, forwarded the request to me, I don't have the exact language in front of me, but immediately a red flag went up, because it seemed to me that this was someone who had a personal vendetta and agenda against me. And I was cautioning Joanne against having yet another person on that wanted to litigate what they found distasteful about my own personal political views in the context of a show where I, as a host, really don't have the opportunity to go back and forth. I have to, moderate a show, be gracious to the person who has come there. But when they sort of open the door to personal attacks, it upsets the balance in a way that I don't think is really appropriate for the show. But I was in a position where I was under a great deal of pressure, once again, to have balance in the coverage that was happening on the show, despite the fact that my radars were one of the only well-performing segments that were happening on the.
Overall, Briahna decided to behave callously towards a guest and conflated her freedom of speech with the freedom from consequences. Briahna can claim all day that her politics is what got her fired, yet every news outlet points out that her visual and verbal dismissal of a guest is what drew everyone's ire. But if you expect her to take personal accountability for it, then you've reached an impasse with reality. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Briahna is a victim of a hate campaign and he's an outspoken black woman and they're just trying to hinder her black girl magic or something. It's always the same pattern, it seems. But let me know in the comments below. I'm the Commentary King, and I'll see you around.